role and what we have to do there. So today we're talking about natural disasters and mediation, which is something close to, of course, Francis's heart. And Mandy has been in Greece, has been affected of definitely by natural disasters, so that part of it. But mediatorvikram.com, you'll find lots of now these circles that I'm creating. So of course, the World Mediation Circle details are here. Mandy, have you had a look at this Mediation Circles section here? So there are lots of mediation circles which have already been launched. Lots are coming up. So to join the World Mediation Circle, you can click here, fill up the form. And then, so we have the, let's start from here. India, World Indigenous Peoples, International Reflective Practice, International Commercial Mediation, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals Mediation Circle, World Refugee Mediation Circle. On 16th, we're launching the International Organizational Mediation Circle, the Family Mediation Circle. Medianos is a game that Massimiliano in Italy has developed, and we are going to launch that circle. Then the Global School and College Mediation, Ken Clogue launches that on the 26th. And then on the 2nd, we have Global Environmental, Climate Change, and Natural Disasters Mediation Circle. All that is happening. There's lots happening, Francis. Lots happening there. So thank you very much for coming into my living room.
Good.
So Francis, it's all about you telling us about the work that you're doing, studying in relation to natural disasters and mediation.
All right. So good day again to you, Vikram. Sorry, our other guest, I can't remember the name. Sorry, I'm meeting you for the first time, Francis. As my name.
We've met again, but it's
okay.
a great opportunity to meet better.
Right. Okay.
In nature environment.
Right. Okay. So I have written a short article that was published sometime, I think, last year or year before, in a journal that is published by the Weinstein Foundation. Weinstein Foundation is an organization that promotes the use of mediation, and it's based in the United States, but has centers in different parts of the world. And well, what I should say is that the law firm connected to it has centers in different parts of the world. And of course, there are lawyers who have been trained by the Weinstein Foundation who are all over the world. I thought it at the time, this is about 2020, important to write this article because of things that were happening around us. There was clearly the impact of climate change. And in the Caribbean where I live, I am from Barbados, and that's where I am at the moment. That's in the Eastern Caribbean, a very small dot that you will see on a map if you try to find it. 166 square miles, about 280,000 people. So it can easily fit into a lot of cities in bigger countries. But nevertheless, we have a vote at the United Nations equal to everybody else's vote. So we have representation at the international level. And we are members of all of the various institutions, World Bank, IMF, etc., you name it. We have a presence there. You may have heard of our Prime Minister, Honorable Mia Mottley, and some of her speeches in relation to the precarious situation of small island states and their debt situation, etc., their inability to raise funds to run the countries that we live in a way that one would have expected, and maintain democracies and so on, because of the constant need to be rebuilding our countries after natural disasters, which may not necessarily have struck Barbados in any serious way, although we did have, I think, a tropical storm a couple of years ago. And you know, people's houses, the government takes on the task of rebuilding people's houses and so on. Do we have a? Am I on? Are you
Yeah,
seeing
yeah.
me?
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Oh, okay, all right. Yeah, something happened to the screen there just now. So in this context, I thought it important to look at all of these issues and draw attention to the likely need for persons trained in conflict resolution, in particular mediators or neutrals, etc., in trying to settle some of the issues that will arise before, during, and after natural disasters. Because of the very nature of these happenings, these occurrences, they are surprises, and sudden, but at the same time, we have now a situation in the world where we should no longer be surprised, in the sense that we should be prepared. The language among the persons who call themselves disaster preparedness technicians has now changed to disaster management. And there's a reason for that. That the idea is that you should put in place mechanisms where you would mitigate the impact of any disaster when it occurs. And actually, I was involved here in the Caribbean in the regional institution, which is called CDEMA, CDEMA, Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, which used to be CDERA, Caribbean Disaster Emergency Response Agency. And they changed it to management for that very reason. They changed the name and they changed the articles of the organization for that very reason, because they thought that what should now be projected is that you should have in place management structures that prepare you for what will happen one day. In the Caribbean, we are talking about hurricanes and sometimes serious flooding. That will not be strange, I'm sure, to people in a lot of other parts of the world, especially the serious flooding. But we are also talking about earthquakes. We are also talking about volcanoes, the effects of volcanoes, and finally, possible tsunamis. We're talking about, over a period of time, losing part of our landscape. And I happen to have lived in at least 2 islands where, after serious so-called bad weather, hurricanes in the area, they don't have to necessarily be direct hits. They could just be in the area, cause rough seas, large swells, and after the aftermath of it is part of the beach is no more. A house that used to be 20 feet from the beach is now 5 feet from the beach, is now actually being hit by the waves when the waves come in. So one of the things for small island states is that we are actually sinking, possibly disappearing, and we know that that's also connected to the whole question of melting glaciers and so on, and the ice sheaths in the Antarctic and the Arctic, etc. So this is the situation. What I'm saying is, part of the preparation ought to be that we be prepared for conflict in these circumstances. And being prepared for conflict isn't being paranoid, or isn't being saying that we are encouraging people to be in conflict so that we will get work. What it is that we're being realistic, and not everybody who is subject to the harm that can be caused by a natural disaster of any nature is going to be calm and, and reasonable about it. And even if they're reasonable, the likelihood is that they cannot, that does not mean they don't have rights. That does not mean they don't have something to struggle for, or to demand, or to request, or to ask questions about. So there are very, very many reasons why people will be asking questions. People will be making requests or demands and want to know what is going to be done. Naturally, the responsibility, if you can call it that, falls on the government of the day, falls on the state. And in some large countries, I know when I say state, I may cause some confusion, because there may be many municipalities that are called states within
we have municipalities, we have states, and then we have the national government. Yes,
the national government. So it may very well, in some situations, fall on the national government or the municipality or the state. But when I say state, I mean the national government, because there's no point in our situation talking about a municipality as distinct from the state in 166 square miles. And most of the other islands, there's not a great deal of difference in relation to that kind of size. So that's the first thing. How do we, as citizens, relate to the state when these things happen? I recall, and Vikram, please guide me if I am going over my time limit or whatever. I recall, because I can talk for a long time on this subject.
All the time in the world we have. No, there is no shortage of time. It's all about you and the topic.
I recall after a hurricane called Ivan in Grenada, my wife, who is a journalist and also actually trained producer, a movie producer, basically, went into Grenada after the event, because I had been living there, but I had gone to a course, and before I could get back, the hurricane struck Grenada. And this is in 2004. And she got footage of an individual who was identified of somebody connected to the security forces, standing at a door where people were entering and taking things out of a place, which was a supermarket, and leaving with them. And he was kind of like just supervising it. And and the questions were asked, was he not supposed to be stopping the people from doing this? And when you really thought about it, you recognize that he really couldn't stop the people from doing it, because these are people who were acting in desperation, and there was no organized methodology for saying, well, such and such a place will be used as a distribution center. Those persons will be compensated later, but right now you want flour, sugar, other necessities, rice, whatever. You can get it at such and such a location, and we will allow you one bag per family or whatever. Nothing like that is in place, because obviously nobody thought about it before. And when we anticipate the impact of these disasters, we always hope for the best. So we always hope that, well, that's not going to be necessary, that the hurricane will pass and we will still have our roof. Electricity will come back in 24 hours, or water will keep running, and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, in the most desperate of situations, this does not happen. And it means that people actually run out of supplies. People get fearful that if they haven't run out of supplies already, they will run out of supplies eventually, and therefore they want to stock up. You are always warned to stock up before. But of course, not everybody has the same income to be able to go and stock up with all these supplies before the event. And even if they did, the question is, where will they put them? If you have a very small house or whatever, and it loses its roof, you probably will also lose these supplies that you have stocked up on. So just the way in which I described that should tell you what we are talking about. Before the event, what is put in place for those kind of desperate moments? What do we have in place? Is there anything in place? Is there anyone who can say, well, look, we need to have persons in different areas, and we need to involve the businessmen and so on, and women, and persons who may have access to certain kinds of supplies, and let them know that they may very well have to join into the effort of helping others to survive this situation. And then we have to have the security forces embraced and involved in helping to arrange that. Therefore, it involves some thinking, a lot of talking. What is reasonable? You're going to have some people pushing back and say, well, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not, it's not in my interest to share anything with anybody, give anybody anything, and so on and so forth. So I'm using that to illustrate what could happen. I have another experience where in another island, immediately after the hurricane, those persons who own heavy duty equipment, like, bulldozers, or they're called different things in different countries. Some people call them payloaders, those things with the big forks and the big, that can pick up stuff and move dirt and move stones and so on. That I had the experience of, in another island, seeing the owners of that kind of equipment without any kind of discussion with anybody, simply going on the road with the equipment and clearing the road. Going and clearing the roads. And that's great. Of course, there are always dangers in that. Sometimes you have electricity lines have fallen, but they're still live. And therefore, there's need to involve public utilities in terms of advising where this kind of stuff can be done safely. What you have there is, however, part of the community saying, we have the equipment to bring things back to normal as quickly as possible, and we acting, okay? What I'm suggesting is, okay, great, but we need to do some talking. We need to do, we don't want anybody to lose their life in the process of doing that on behalf of the community. So how do we arrange that that individual speaks to the utility people? How do we arrange that they speak to the security people? And so on and so forth. When they put their equipment on the road, nobody's going to stop them and say, well, you're not supposed to be on the road. We have an issue, the all clear. Instead of that, we have a situation where, okay, we're expecting 3 guys with bulldozers on this area here to help clear the fallen trees, the debris, the fallen rocks, whatever. And we're going to watch while this is being done. The utility people have said they've given the all clear for this area in terms of live wires are no longer live, so we can start moving on that. There is need for a lot of talking. There's need for people to be reasonable and to recognize different levels of needs. Everybody, immediately after the striking of whatever disaster, hopes that they're the ones that are going to get back electricity first. Hopes that they're the ones that are going to get back water first, etc. Be able to go to the gas station down the road to put gas in the car as soon as possible so that they can get around, and so on and so forth. And right now, there is a lot of movement, but without guidance, movement, but without any agreement as to, well, how we're going to do this in an organized fashion. And maybe I'll be accused of being a little bit too bureaucratic or whatever, but at the end of the day, I think it's better to do it in an organized fashion. Clearly, there's some places where it's not going to happen. They're too remote, cut off, whatever. People will be desperate. They're going to act differently. That happens, for example, where people are bringing in supplies from overseas by boat, and they reach a port, and they brought these supplies for certain people who have contacted them and said, well, I need 8 cartons of water, for my family and friends and or an organization, church, whatever. If you land them at the port and a crowd just takes over and goes with it. So that can happen because they're desperate for water, and they see somebody come to the port and put down water, and That's it. So there has to be the willingness to say, look, when we land, is there going to be some kind of security there who can talk to people and say, well, okay, everybody's going to get some. We got lots of water coming. But right now, the priority is for so and so, so. At least talk it through. You may not be able to convince everybody that that's reasonable, but talk it through. Talk it through. How can we make sure that everybody benefits from these efforts? And basically, that's where we are going. The other thing about it is, what do you put in place to make sure that certain services continue? In relation to the courts, for example, there were a number of issues that arose. Luckily, within the 1990s and into early 2000s, etc., 21st century, we have a court system that started to invest in saving material online, saving data online. So after, there were two particular hurricanes that we had, Irma and Maria, which hit two islands particularly hard. One was, well, there's a series of islands called the British Virgin Islands. They call themselves the Virgin Islands, but they put British to distinguish themselves from the United States Virgin Islands. They're all one geographic whole, one thing. If you go sailing down there, there's nothing going to tell you which island is US or which is British. But people from there know which is which. And as it would suggest, they are all part of this community, so to speak, of islands. And they have to organize themselves accordingly. But the important thing is that the islands organize themselves in such a way that, you know, they are able to get the necessary help. In the British Virgin Islands, the court system had already started to save material online and in the cloud, et cetera, et cetera. So when the hurricane hit in British Virgin Islands, and the buildings were damaged and files lost, et cetera, court could continue because they had a lot of the stuff saved in the cloud. And actually, because of the relationship they had with neighboring islands, they were able to continue court in a different island. So the court of the British Virgin Islands sat in St. Lucia, which is an independent country, not British, not US, independent country, but part of a community called the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States and the wider community called CARICOM, and they sat there. There was also the unfortunate, but I guess necessary aspect of persons who were incarcerated having to be moved from one island to another, and so on. I'm just saying that all of this requires, one, planning and management of a kind that insulates you against a certain kind of damage. And in that process, mediators can help to make sure that, you know, you don't unfairly exclude people, or you inform people who need to be informed, or you put in place the measures where people who do not have a lot of money or whatever, can actually engage in a mediation process rather than trying to continue with a trial, which is going to be costly, et cetera, in those kind of circumstances. So you have these issues developing naturally that ask for an intervention in case of conflict. They cry out for it. It's like, okay, well, we've lost all of our files or whatever. What do we do? You make sure that you don't lose all your files. Have a discussion with your stakeholders, and you do what is necessary to make sure you don't lose all your files by storing them in the cloud and then making them available. We are part of a relationship with other islands where they have resources that have not been damaged. Okay, so we negotiate with them how we can how their resources can help us to get through this period. And of course, when it happens there, we will reciprocate. This is the kind of relationship that I'm suggesting. This is what I'm the way forward. And I'm saying mediators or persons trained in that kind of thinking can be extremely helpful in doing that work, making sure that things go right, avoiding unnecessary conflict. There will be some that is necessary. People would want to argue the case and so on. But it is important that, you know, the option be there. And since I'm speaking about disaster mediation in particular, I remember when I resided, as I said earlier, I didn't know if I mentioned the country, but it was Grenada. When I worked there, Hurricane Ivan hit, and I was out, but I came back eventually. And one of the places damaged was the mediation office. So mediation was out of commission for a few months. But what I found, of course, was that as soon as the message went out that we want to start back mediation, we were able to get it started back because they were willing to operate in a different location because the office had been damaged. They needed to, you know, have the offices elsewhere and do the mediation, etc., in a different setting. So people sometimes are much more willing to make an effort after these disasters to come out and help others in ways that they can. And persons with mediation skills, what I'm suggesting is you'll be surprised as to how helpful you can be in those circumstances, because people really need help. You know, you're as I said, you're desperate. You're totally flabbergasted. You don't know what to do. You have lost your house, you've lost your car, or whatever. You know, maybe no one is injured or no one has died in your family, but there's still a whole lot of confusion as to what you're going to do. And actually, the record showed that in the aftermath of Ivan, a lot of people died, not of injury, but of broken heart and, you know, overwhelming emotional impact, et cetera, especially elderly people, people beyond middle age, et cetera, started to die. And they just didn't know what to do after this situation. So of course that brings into the whole question of counseling, which mediators may not always be qualified to do, but at the end of the day, suggests, of course, the intervention of a third party. So I could go on and on. I mean, what is happening in the world today is that some of the issues caused by climate change are bringing into being the need for legal processes in place, court cases where state agencies, private sector agencies, in Latin America, there's a lot of it, you know, large manufacturers and so on who have changed the landscape, cut down a lot of trees, changed the nature, you know, the natural environment that indigenous people lived in, etc. And I think, Vikram, you've had a session on this, or you're going to have something on this at some point in time, the whole question of indigenous people and so on. But
a whole symposium I did on that. Indigenous peoples and mediation. We launched a Indigenous Peoples Mediation Circle also. So Ken had launched that. So that was a nice session. You should watch that also.
Right. So you see how things dovetail, you know, the whole idea of what these disasters kind of expose and the need for persons to be conscious of what could arise after. And there have already been, you know, serious court cases over these things and so on. Now, as long as we're dealing with expensive court cases, etc., mediation plays a part. At a recent conference in Belfast, Commonwealth Law Association had a conference on mediation, and there were two presentations in particular which were which you know left me with a lot of food for thought, because they were both suggesting how important mediation was, the level of use of technology. And first of all, there's a Sir Geoffrey Goff, who is the master of the rules in England. He's a very pro-tech individual who was talking about the importance of, but he seemed to suggest, well, in smaller cases, where there's not a lot at stake, etc., there should be very little need to go beyond either mediation or quick settlement online. And you can also do mediation online. But he was very much in favor of persons looking at speedy settlement by whatever mechanism is available. Of course, the rules provide for mediation, or just quick settlement online using technology. Nowadays, with this, what is it called?
ChatGPT.
ChatGPT. There actually be some technology that suggests to you what the best solution. I don't know if it works. But
we actually went through a live kind of thing in the World Mediators Conference. So 2 sessions, I took people through a live thing. Let's go through a problem. Let's put it out there and ask ChatGPT to be a mediator. And very interesting solutions it comes up with. I mean, I've been saying that, look, let people use this as the first responder kind of thing. So it's available to everyone and everywhere in the world. They can actually access something, and let's use technology for good.
Exactly. So this is what is coming out of some of the mainstream in the court system itself. They're saying, look, you're not going to want to, in a lot of these cases, try to settle everything by way of a judicial intervention, a judicial decision. There are things that you can negotiate. There are things that a mediator can come in and help with along the way of bringing the process to an end. At the end of the day, there may be an aspect of the conflict of the case which has to be settled by a judge, but to getting it there, you may be able to use mediation at various levels to iron out certain things, so you get it there faster, less expensive, with less acrimony, etc., to bring the matter to a close. So all of these things arise as a result of thinking as to what the aftermath of a disaster could be or would be, and I just think that it is an area very ripe for intervention, for reaping the fruit that mediators can help to cultivate and for others to benefit from. And I thought that it was important for us to have a discussion like this, on it. A lot of the outcomes that have to do with climate change, etc., the litigation is expensive. And there's some people that think that for some reason or the other, expensive litigation cannot be mediated, but that's not true. As I worked as a lawyer in the British Virgin Islands, where they have these offshore companies, etc., and a lot of the cases they don't necessarily go to mediation, but a lot of them don't reach trial because the preliminary issues are sufficient to guide the lawyers and the parties as to where they should stop. I think in the same way, mediation, and of course, mediations have been used in expensive litigation to help to settle matters. And that really has nothing to do with it. How large the litigation is and how expensive it is and how many technical people you have involved and so on. Sometimes you have to look at what makes sense and ask yourself, well, let's do the right thing in relation to what makes sense. You don't want to be strangled by a whole lot of debt, and it's all debt about how to pay lawyers and how to pay the court, etc., etc. So I would want to suggest that this is an area ripe for some further consideration of those persons who are developing mediation modules at universities or whatever, and thinking about how to train mediators, how to train a mediator that specializes in disaster mediation. What are you looking for? You're looking at one level, crisis mediation, because you're dealing with persons who are high pitch of frustration or anger or depression or whatever. And therefore you're dealing with persons who know how to deal with crisis mediation, crisis conflict resolution. And people need special training for that, because ordinary mediation, as you would know, Vikram, can get under your skin. Not that you get angry with anybody, but you can, what do you call that process where you take on the emotion that other people are feeling? And it can be very exhausting. So, so people have to be trained for it. You have to be understand what the issues might be and be prepared for those issues to arise, and be put in place strategic positions to respond to these things. Whether it be in the relationship between the security forces and the population. You know, in a lot of cases, state of emergency declared, and what does that mean? What does that mean? They said, stay off the street. They said, no looting. There will be no, you know, we will take looting seriously and you may be arrested or shot or whatever, you know. You got to look at all of these things very carefully and determine how to best deal with them in different circumstances. As I said, I gave the example earlier of the officer standing. He was known to be an officer. He was standing there and he was kind of supervising it. And people would say, well, he was supervising looting. But did he have an option? In those circumstances, did he have an option? And maybe it was the best decision in the circumstances. The problem is the owner, of course, would have felt, well, he wasn't consulted and so on. So but we got to take these things into consideration. And the best way to do it is to have discussions before the impact and know what the possibilities are and kind of have guidelines as to what we do in circumstances like that. How do we settle that? Just one thing before I close, the United States seems to have the most, I can be educated on this and I will be very happy to hear from others from other countries, but the United States seems to have the most elaborate system from state to state and also at the federal level of post-disaster assistance. Of course, it's not perfect. You know, we saw after Katrina in Louisiana, what happened to large sects of the population, that the assistance didn't reach them for days. And a lot of people simply died of exposure and that kind of thing. But I had the opportunity after Sandy in New York of actually shadowing a mediation around the damage caused by Sandy off the beaches area there of New York City. And how elaborate it was, even though it was not, when you looked at how the mediation was conducted, there was nothing elaborate about it. But the system is elaborate because the state is involved, the federal government is involved, the state is involved. And then they set up the kind of mechanism that I spoke about earlier in advance, or if not in advance, very quickly after the disaster, whereby insurance companies are immediately recruited. Individuals who are involved in construction and mitigation of physical damage, etc., are recruited. And of course, then, you have to designate which court structure is going to be made available for these particular claims, etc., to be made. And the one that I shadowed was a situation of a claim being made against a construction company, which had not done very good work after Sandy. And of course, if you didn't do good work, then the person is saying, well, I shouldn't have to pay this person. It's all in the context of the state trying to assist, but yet you're still having an individual in conflict with another about payment. And that is where the mediator came in and was trying to see how she could help them to settle this situation, because it wouldn't have existed were it not for mechanisms put in place by the state to allow persons to recover in this kind of organized way. But of course, a state has to have the resources to put those things in place, where the money to bring a construction company in, to entice the insurance companies to get involved and have them guaranteed that they're going to benefit from it. They're not going to do it for free. And of course, mediators and lawyers involved, but in a very organized way, because the whole question is how to avoid out and out, war, basically, after these things happen. So yeah, I will stop there. And if there's any questions, I hope that I've got my point across in terms of how important.
I think I think the whole thing about actually the role of mediators and mediation both look separately. There is a role of mediators, like you said, on a lot of factors, the coordinating part of it, and of course that dialogue and situations where things are, everyone is worked up about a lot of things, so to have someone there to be able to handle that conversation. But this insurance thing is a very important area. When you spoke about the insurance part, rebuilding is a very important aspect of what happens later, and insurance claims are going to be there, and they should be resolved as fast as possible, because people have to get back into their houses, rebuild houses. So I think that also needs to be focused as how mediation can be a very important area in insurance claims. So I think
right.
But the only thing for Francis is now, but what about my concept of developing these mediators on the ground, available to everyone, and in situation and natural disasters, who your local mediator is. You have a
the court system is somewhat lacking in getting that done, and that's where I got my foundation, so to speak. I did study mediation and so on, got trained independently of the court system, but eventually I was involved in putting it in place in the court system. And that's always very limited in terms of the number of mediators available, et cetera, et cetera. What I also observed, however, was that the two things can be kind of connected, because what you can have is a cadre of mediators who are on a list, who provide services on a daily basis in a situation where, people are, it's not as formal as the what we would call the high court annex mediation. So you have a situation where somebody, owes somebody money, and they're in the lower court, and they're asked at the beginning of the session, well, would you agree to mediate this situation? And they say, okay. And the mediator is on duty to immediately deal with it. So I think that helps to kind of bridge the gap between community mediation and court-connected mediation, because there's a broader sector of people who are now going to be exposed to it, and the individuals who are mediators, and that being promoted at that level could probably, encourage people now to engage mediators in the community more often than not. I tried in at least one of the countries where I worked to encourage the formation of a mediation association. You might want to call it the Mediation Circle. And this is in existence. And actually they sent me a message a couple of weeks ago to say that they are now a recognized nonprofit company, and that's in St. Lucia. And that's basically an association of mediators, and they're nothing to do with the court. They are their own body who are, trying in their own way to keep mediation alive, to create services and so on. What I saw in that particular community, which I think is what helped that mediation association to survive and to get to the point where it is that there's a part of the structure of the society that creates conflict in relation to the connection between family and land. And when you take into account that in small countries, small islands, land is scarce, and let's say a family has, a couple of acres of land, and in that family you have 8 children, the parents have 8 children, and they die, and now the 8 children are expected to share the land, and they sit down on it for, let's say, 5 years, and then somebody goes to the bank. And that person who goes to the bank decides they want to build a nice wall house, or look pretty, and so on and so forth, etc. Nice driveway, car park, car porch, etc., etc. And immediately the others get jealous. It is very interesting how family members can get jealous of other family members. And then there's a fight over, well, is this person really entitled to that piece of the land, etc., etc. And that society, unfortunately, is very susceptible to that kind of conflict. And I think mediators can help a whole lot in resolving that kind of conflict. There's a lot of emotion in it because there's always, oh, well, Granny always said that piece was supposed to be mine. And Daddy always said, no, we got to share that piece between 3 of us and not 2. And so on and so forth. And the argument goes on. And sometimes then what happens is somebody wants to plant some crop, and the other person wants to raise sheep or goats or cows. And of course, there's a conflict there because the animals want to go into the crops and eat the crops and so on and so forth. And so there's that natural kind of situation which creates conflict of a kind where I think mediators should be very helpful. But of course, the first thing that comes to people's mind is court and lawyer and this and that and that's and third, and then you have to kind of talk them down from that.
So let's just get Mandy, and I think Mandy wants to leave. Yes, Mandy, your experience with natural disasters and mediation, please.
I was thinking to speak about the old disaster we had here in my island in Zakynthos, where we have very strong earthquakes. And the island in 1953 was in complete disaster because not only the earthquake was very strong, but also it was the time the women were cooking and there was a fire after that, so it was also burned. So there was nothing left here. This experience is very interesting, and that's what I want to put on the table, is that though we have this experience, it is very interesting that people haven't changed their mindset. It was yesterday this thing happened. All these people are alive and live in this place, but they don't do all these things, these very interesting and beautiful and logical things you said, dear Francis. Nothing has changed. They are not waiting. They don't have not even the fear, though it happens again and again since then. And I was wondering, because there is these 2 categories of the fears, it's the feelings of fear and terror. They say terror is what is present. It is at the moment, it exists. It is not something that you have to think about. It happens, so it is real. It is the tiger that comes in the living room and you see it and you are terrified. That's the fear. The fear is to fantasize and to imagine and to think that maybe something which when you think about it again and again and again and never happens, this fear becomes very low when you don't pay attention. But if you have a disaster and you've seen what that thing means, and you have all these instincts, because we are humans and we are civilized, but when things like that happen, all the instincts of survival come up. And that's also a point that people are humiliated. I mean, there is no egoism. You have to accept help, to ask for help from the person who is next to you, which you wouldn't have done in normal circumstances. And I keep some words from what you said, very beautiful words that bring many beautiful ideas also, because you started speaking about rebuilding, and that was what we heard yesterday from a professor of JERD, who said that that's what mediation is, to rebuild relationships. And this comes some very natural things and the very, very exact meaning of words, and the other meanings that we give when we talk about things like relationships. It's rebuilding a town, rebuilding relationships. It's all this mindset that you said, which is not only qualifications, it's this mindset that mediators have, that they can help people be willing to do the effort, as you said. Why? To find hope. And is it only to find the lost hope, or it can happen, because that's a very huge thing also you put on the table, before and after the disaster. And where is our role much more important? It is after or before? It is the fear that can help, the good fear that can help to act before, or you have to wait for the terror of the present danger, and then to use these qualities and this mindset to find a way to rebuild. And is it, I mean, it is so common what things happen in nature and what things happen in our minds and in our relationships. It's so common. Maybe disasters can help us realize what is disaster in all aspects of life. So maybe it would be sometimes it is necessary to face disasters to realize the important things, unfortunately. But it is something that we could, in a way, help to happen before, as you said, and not after the disaster.
Have you ever heard of Bob Marley?
Yeah, of course. We've grown with Bob Marley.
Don't start, Francis. She's going to start singing also.
Oh, no, I wouldn't sing. I wouldn't try to, but I could tell you, Bob Marley's one of his most popular songs has a line that says, "When the rain falls, it don't fall on one man's housetop. Remember that." And you know, it is so apt for this part of the world, I guess any part of the world, because what it says is that it is this kind of earthquakes, etc., are great levelers in truth and in fact, you know, and everybody then has to realize the common humanity and realize the benefit in coming together to solve the problem. Because even if it didn't destroy your house, it probably destroyed your neighbor's house, or your friend's house, or your family's house, or your business place, or something, and you're all in it together. And I think that's something that has to be understood.
Yep. Yes, Mandy. I think, but yes, I think that aspect of this, I like that terror and fear, that part of it. So I think, yeah. Yes, Mandy, that's definitely.
Yes, and it's very, very interesting this to realize this difference, because fear is the way that not only the mind takes the biggest power that can have, and others take power on you when you manipulate you through fear. But terror is not something in mind. It is present, existent. So if we could realize this difference and not living in fear, but having in mind what is real and what is not, we may realize how many things are common between us and how connected we are, and how we can face the disaster and be prepared for this terror, but not the problem is to be the most terrifying thing is not to be prepared to face the terror and the disaster, which is natural. I mean, natural disasters and nature is the source of knowledge. I mean, if we notice all this natural phenomenon, maybe we could realize that we are part of them, and what happens to our life and to nature are so common, and we are just a cell of the nature. And it is one mindset. That's what I'm trying to say. It is the mindset. If it has to do with people, if it has to do with nature, if it has to do with anything, it is one mindset for all these things. And the mediation and the mediators have a very, very, very beautiful role in this evolution of people for well-being and peace and all these beautiful things.
So take us through the roles and the role, Mandy. What, according to you, are the roles to be prepared for a natural disaster, going through it, and post the event? Please, what are your some thoughts on that? Something that you want to throw out there?
You mean what's the role of the mediator?
Yeah.
Before and after?
Before, during, and after.
I believe that the mediator has a huge role, because if we could find a way to spread the peacemakers and mediation, but peacemakers, I mean in everything, simple everyday life things. And if people and citizens realize that they have not only the right, but to have their own opinion, the role each of us in our life, not waiting for somebody to save us. Because in disasters, everybody is looking for somebody to save him. And after the disaster, everybody is looking whose fault was that. But if we were working before the disaster, there would be no need for Salvatore, these people who save, and not people to judge, but having opinion and people participating in these common things and dangers, which is the natural things that happen around us. Because everybody knows much better than not the government, the man who lives in a small place where the river is next to it and he has grown there, and he remembers that somebody there was a river and now it is not. And when there will be the disaster, the nature knows where was the river, even if we have put houses there. So there will be a disaster there. So everybody has something to contribute to respect nature and respect ourselves as part of the nature, so we could communicate, contact, connect, and realize that we have opinion, it's our home, nature is our home, and as we resolve a dispute with the neighbor, it is nature also our home, and we have to be interested for that as for our own house. That's our house. Earth is our house. And we are all living together in that house. In that house, we are all family. We share, we have the same needs, we have to share this house. Like the family you were telling before, dear Francis, so that's the idea. That's the common idea. I believe that it is much more important to help before, to bring a mindset. Of course, after, it is this neutrality, this clear mind, these qualities and qualifications that we have to find the important and to put things in order, of course, is something that we could contribute. But before would be better.
But Francis, do you think that after some people, when they say whatever the effects of a natural disaster are, do they look at life differently, look at dispute resolution differently, look at relationships differently? What have you noticed?
And for how long?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, it's I think there's need for simply drawing to people's attention that there's a different way to deal with things, because it's very easy for people to be what we call every man for himself. But there's some tendency in some communities for people to come together to help each other. And of course, that's another way of thinking like a mediator, in a sense, so that you take practical steps to help each other. But I think what happens is that when the outside forces, so to speak, get involved, and then they want to dictate or suggest how things should go, and you then get division, because this one thinks that it should be this way, and that one thinks it should be that way. And, so the agricultural people are going to think that the farmers need more help than the industrial people, and the people with offices in the cities and so on are going to think, well, the important thing is to get the utilities back on so I can get my business working as soon as possible and make more money, make some money, and so on. And everybody then starts to think about themselves, And so I do think that there has been some learning in relation to putting things in place before. And I think that is coming through very strongly from various sectors. Insurance people are suggesting it to people. The government agencies are suggesting it. As I said, the Disaster Preparedness Organization changed their name to Disaster Management. Because of that, they wanted to suggest that they would be actually putting things in place, what they call focal points and so on, where these are the places where people are to report to and go if they want a certain kind of communication with the first responders, etc. So there has been some learning. There has been some learning at the institutional state level, at the business level, and there has been some learning. General community, I still think we got a lot of work to do, because there is this dependency kind of attitude that we have to depend on somebody else, and therefore we need the favor. We need to be the priority. We need to fight to be the priority. And I think that is where some of the difficulty comes in. So
Morning in progress.
Yeah, if people could learn that they need to see themselves as important as anybody else, but at the same time, they need to also have as much responsibility as everybody else. And then we try to manage that. Clearly, the higher levels of desperation have to be dealt with first, and we move from there. So there's some learning, but I think the general population we still have a lot of work to do to get people to accept that there's a different way to try to settle issues and so on after a disaster, and to look at the possibilities of disaster before. Because something as basic in our countries there's something called a strap. I'm not sure the technical word for it is, but in the building structures, because the damage that a hurricane does from the the high wind is to take a roof. That's one of the main kinds of damage that you get in a hurricane, the removal of a roof by high wind. And they are called hurricane straps. And a lot of builders are still constructing buildings without hurricane straps. And they're getting away with it. So that has to be mandated by law, that you must put hurricane straps on your building. And people need to learn that this is for your own good. This is for the good of, don't try to do it cheap, because when that hurricane hits, you're gonna lose your roof. And but of course, at the end of the day, it needs to be insured, because otherwise it's going to be very difficult to get it replaced. Of course, there are going to be that category of people who can't afford the insurance, and they have to be looking for help from the state. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it depends on who the person is and what their situation is and how crucial it is to them. The business people can easily sit down and do the calculations in terms of profits, losses, and sustainability. That word has become very popular. Sustainability, the sustainability of their business. They do that kind of analysis, or they have people who they can go to and pay to help them with that kind of analysis. But the average guy may not have those kind of resources, may not think that way, and therefore you got to really try to instill that thinking in a different way.
Well, I just think that, is there a certain spiritual development of a community and a society when they face such a thing, and then they start looking at relationships in that manner, or they do not? What really happens? Because look, I haven't been with people who face that right there on the ground, so I don't know what really happens in their mind at that time. But I mean, what really happens? I mean, what goes on? How do you look at the world differently? How do you look at people differently? Things.
As I said, there was one country in which there was this spontaneous response from persons with certain kind of equipment to just getting out there and clearing the roads and so on. They don't even have to be told. They don't have to be asked, just go, right? So that they must have learned that over a period of time. They must have recognized over a period of time that that is a quote unquote responsibility, even though nobody put it in any law or anything like that. They recognize that having that kind of equipment puts them in a peculiar position to assist the national government, to assist the people, etc., in terms of their ability to get around. Because that is one of the basic things that after a hurricane becomes problematic. Roads are blocked. If you're near the sea, the sea might have come in over the road, a lot of sand can't be passed. If you live near a hillside, the boulders may have come down by the hillside and block the road. Bush goes over the road. So there are various ways in which people can learn lessons from that. And I think that kind of signal, what I just described, signal it. But I don't know. I think that more research would have to be done in terms of talking to people and finding out how they really feel about it. There are people, as I said, that were quick to, faster than we expected. A group of mediators in Grenada who were eager to get back to work after Hurricane Ivan. And when it was first discussed, everybody was saying, no, these people, they must have suffered damage in their homes and so on, leave them alone, don't expect anything. And when the request went out to them and said, well, okay, we need to meet and get going again so that we can continue to assist with mediation and keep the system going, there was a lot of enthusiasm to get back to work. People wanted to get back on the job, to get back doing what they were doing, and within a great deal of enthusiasm. So they probably did learn that, the message from this is that you shouldn't lie down and say die. You have to get up, you have to respond, and you have to put things in place so that next time you know how to do it better. You have to improve from where you were before. So I think there are little signs, but it's not overwhelming. So it's work. It's work to be done.
I'm just thinking that I mean, these are situations when it can bring out the best or the worst in people. It can, I think, go both ways. So you really don't know what is going to happen. But just the fact that it can bring out the best in people, that means there is that aspect of people there. It's out there to at least show, yes, people can be like this. They can bring out whatever. I mean, different people can do things in a different ways. Someone can do a little something somewhere. Someone, like you said, might have some machine or something that they can use. But main thing is to be out there, to be able to work for the community. I think the thing is that you consider it a community at all. I think this is where I've been trying to take this whole World Mediation Circle, and I have this discussion on. I think the role of mediators is also to develop communities, and that's going to be a very major part of their work. So, and around it, all the other things will happen. I think that by itself maybe is the starting point, that you create a community, and then you look at even dispute resolution from the perspective of the larger community and not just that individual aspect of it. Yep.
Of course. Yeah, I agree with you there. There has to be that growth in terms of cultural growth, perspective, to think as a community rather than just as an individual. And I think that mediation can help in doing that. But the first thing about how to resolve conflict, it puts a responsibility on everybody to try to find the most peaceful way, first of all, to resolve conflict, and to avoid spontaneous resort to violence. I mean, even it's as basic as that, you are helping to build a different practice, a different approach to the community, a different approach to your neighbor.
But the thing is, that Francis, mediation won't do it. It is mediators who would do it, and people like you have to be out there, available to the community. As look, finally, it's about wisdom. It's finally about wisdom, and that is where the role of mediators, the people with the mediator mindset, comes in. I think that if we don't have that, mediation will just be another word. Yes, okay, there is something like that happening, and which of course you heard me say that enough time. Okay, court system has developed something there. There's something called mediation. We should try it. I don't see that as the way out. But for me, it's these people like you are out there, available to people to see, not just in a mediation, but your role as a mediator. So you have a larger role in the community. So they see that the trust develops. They see, I mean, just the fact that you are bringing in something where you're actually bringing people together. You just collaboration doesn't have to be only in dispute resolution. It could be much larger activities also. So to be involved, be actively involved in those kinds of things. To first for me, it's the trust in the person, then the process. I think that's the way I'm looking at it.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, that is required. That kind of development is required. I mean, I think I might have said it before, where my first strong feeling about mediation came into being from exposure to criminal cases, not civil cases, but criminal cases, where I saw how easy it was, or especially a young person, to get into trouble by a spontaneous act of violence. And growing up in my particular space, I used to be told, before you do anything, count to 10. And I guess that was a start. You don't always have time to count 10, of course, unfortunately. So, but what it means is that think of your options, and and consider what you think the best option is at the time. And I think that the culture was moving towards, and it's still basically in a situation where a lot of people in very easily provoked and fly off the handle to do things that make no sense, and don't try to help others to understand how they can avoid these situations, how they can avoid, first of all, provoking these situations, and then secondly, if they themselves are on the side of the provoked, how to respond to those situations in a way that allows them maybe to point out something, but use no violence or aggression in doing so. I wouldn't go as far as they say there's certain practices which say do nothing, but maybe there's some wisdom in that in some circumstances. I think, however, when you have an opportunity to teach something, not that you're talking down to people, but to guide them and to embrace them in a process which helps them to avoid certain kinds of behavior in the future, that I think is a responsibility of certain of a mediator or a person who thinks like a mediator, who wants to resolve conflict. You can't get rid of conflict. Conflict is good in some situations and is required in some situations, but destruction is not required because there's conflict. You don't have to destroy somebody else's property or injure them or take their life or anything like that. But at the end of the day, recognize the opportunity that conflict provides to provide some guidance of a different way forward and of a different way of going forward together, as a community, as a business, as persons involved in a business relationship or a community relationship or a family relationship or whatever it is.
I think that's why I'm saying that, first of all, that Barbados Mediation Circle, why that's important is because through that you bring out these people with that mindset who are all there. Let's bring them out. Let's at least, I mean, people should know, yes, people like that exist in our communities. They're out there. I'm not saying that we don't know what those numbers are going to be. It doesn't have to be about numbers. It's about the people. So be it in situations of natural disasters or otherwise, at least these people should be identified, should be available to the community, because this is also a very important resource to have. The community should have that resource available to them, knowing that these are people with that mindset, to bring them in various situations. So I think, Francis, we have to work on that. We have to, and I keep saying yours is one of those models, a whole country which is with a population which would, like I said, would be maybe 500 meters around not 500 meters, maybe a kilometer around my place. Radius might be. So I think we should develop that and let's put it out there. Let's see how it works.
I get it. Whenever I have an opportunity to speak about these things, I try my best to put those ideas forward. And every now and then I get an opportunity. I hopefully going to get an opportunity on Tuesday coming to speak to some people from the Bar Association and the judicial system and the administration of justice a little bit. And I'm supposed to speak to people in another island towards the month of November. So hopefully I get an opportunity to throw this in,
But beyond the legal profession, we want to reach the people. How do we reach the communities? What is our connect with the communities?
Well, part of the problem in these very small societies is that we are overwhelmed by politics, and it is very hard to get people away from that, because what has happened as a result of politics is that people feel that everything that they have in some cases, they owe to a politician. So whether it be the education they have, the water supply to the area, the road, the electricity, the utilities in general, you know, the way they live, etc. They feel they owe these things to a politician. And it's very important. It's very difficult sometimes to get them to realize that the politician needed them as much as they need the politician. So that if the politician didn't have their support, they couldn't get the things done that they say that they got done. So they also had a role to play in getting these things for themselves. And they should continue to think that way, that they have a role to play in getting things for themselves. But they also should have some kind of concept of how the society in general can be improved. And it shouldn't be thought about in a partisan way. It shouldn't be thought about, well, because I am this, then I'm going to say this, or because I'm that, I'm going to say that. It should really be looked at as objectively as possible. And so that, you know, you have an understanding, at least from your area of practice or the community in which you live or whatever, you have an understanding of what is important to that community and, you know, what needs to be protected, what needs to be encouraged in that community. And you fight for that. You discuss that, you negotiate that, or when there's need for somebody to mediate issues around that, then you help to mediate it, you know. But it is a struggle because, of course, there's going to be that set of people that are going to remain silent. You don't want to have anything to do with anybody. And then there's going to be that broad set of people who are, well, if you're saying this, you're great. If you're saying that, you're not great. It's that's kind of struggle where bit by bit, you have to be able to convince people that they are important and they can think for themselves. They can come up with their own ideas about solutions and they can sit down, discuss these things with the help of a third party when necessary, etc., to resolve issues that will inevitably arise. You will have issues. You will have issues. So a couple of days ago here in Barbados, there was an issue as to how a simulation attack at a school was conducted. And a lot of people were calling in on the radio and saying, well, you know, this body must resign and that body must resign. And very little was being said about, well, is it a good thing that they're trying to prepare people for the worst in the sense of, well, you know, nowadays people are going into schools with guns and that kind of thing. How do we prepare ourselves for this stuff? And very few people were looking at it from that point of view because the partisan argument had taken over. This was an opportunity to get at the particular agency of the state and say who must resign, etc., because it didn't go perfectly, because it had flaws. You know, rather than, okay, we must do that better next time. Glad that we're learning, however, how to do this thing because it's coming. You know, this is, unfortunately, this is the society in which we live, and we're going to get this. It's unfortunate. We hope to be able to live in a society sometime where this is not as important as it is, but it's part of our reality now. That an individual will go into a school with a knife or cutlass or whatever.
But you have that situation happening in Barbados.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't happen often, but it has happened. Mm-hmm. And therefore, the schools have decided that they need to, you know, have drills. So like how you have a bomb scare drill or whatever, or a fire drill, you know, you now have to have a drill in relation to an intruder in the school setting. And we still have some schools where they're all girls. So, you know, there's not even anybody who is going to fight back an intruder with a cutlass because it's probably going to be a man and these girls are going to go hysterical, right? and that's part of the problem. So, but what the difficulty is getting the community to come together and understand what is the way forward. and agree on what is the way forward, rather than attacking it in a purely partisan way and saying, well, this body must resign, that body must do this and this. You must do better. But the effort was something that is understood to be required because of what is happening in our systems, you know. And if that is the case, we are interested in seeing how they will do better the next time. Probably a good case for a mediator to be involved, you know,
Yeah.
but
Well,
anybody else?
look, Francis, the way I structured it, which of course I've spoken to you about the whole structure, the idea is that it's not going to be the entire community. It's going to be a community within a community who believes in, of course, sitting together, discussing, collaborating, resolving. And that's community, let it grow as it grows. But to start with, people who have that mindset just come together. And that in terms of course issues within the community can be discussed by them. They have it's a different voice. So activism, politics, advocacy, and this, it's a different voice. I mean, it's just a conversation which some people just can't have otherwise. Some people are required sometimes to facilitate that conversation. So I think that's the beginning. But only thing is that who are those people who are going to be our connect with the community? I'm looking at school teachers. I don't know whether you look at school teachers as that option, but I feel that
we have in our system school counselors, and they probably could be targeted because obviously they are there to advise students and teachers about things that are happening in the school community. The teachers, the leaders themselves, the head teachers or the class teacher or whatever, the one who is responsible for a certain subject matter or whatever, they can also provide leadership, because education can't just be about learning mathematics in a technical way. You know, you got to put it in a context. You're learning mathematics so that you can survive in the society. Well, yeah, let's talk about the society. Let's talk about, you know, what happens. Why you need to know why that 2 and 2 equals 4. You know, let's talk about how that happens in society, out there in the marketplace, and so on and so forth. And you get an opportunity to talk about possibility of conflict and resolving conflict with your skills. And
that's what I think.
things like that can happen.
That's what we need. We just need that connect, like you're saying, these counselors, if they are the ones who are already connected, so they're connected to the children. And I've said, look, everywhere, school teachers have that respect in the community also. So I think that's a good connect to have. But Mandy wanted to come in. Mandy, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I was listening very carefully all this time, and now lately I heard something that touched me and brought me an idea to share. Here in Zakynthos, we used to have this something in the ethics that was very easy to when there was an issue which was difficult, they were killing each other. And it is called, like in Italy, vendetta. It comes from there, such as Crete in Greece has the same thing. And there were genders and all the families, one after the other, you know, taking revenge and killing each other, endless. That's what gave the society the need to help the situation, which was completely out of justice and court. And there started some idea which is called here in Zakynthos kalanthropy, which is what is mediation nowadays. Kalanthropy, it's like philanthropy, as we say. It's to do the good. And always they were saying, we will bring a good man. This is what kalanthropy is. We will bring the good man to stop the bad things from happening, the worst things from happening. I mean, I realized while listening to these very beautiful things that here in Zakynthos, indeed, and maybe it is something that works to avoid the worst, then you realize what is the good. And here in Zakynthos, they invested mediation in our language is kalanthropy. They found this way to stop people from taking guns and killing each other for years, for hundreds of years. So disaster, I still think strongly and stronger than before that disasters are a way to make people themselves try and ask for these ways mediators and mediation has. I mean, it could be very useful to take these chances because the feelings and the needs that come up and arise for what is important in these circumstances of disasters are clearer and people can realize. So maybe we could give value to this unfortunate reality to help people change for them better.
What do you think? But before, what you just said was one thing that I want to put out there for you, Andy, is that in the symposium number 1, there was a session with Christian Chereji, who actually went to Crete and actually saw the situation in Crete. I don't know whether you saw this session. So Francis, basically in Crete, they have this.
Same thing.
They have these
vendetta.
These
the
blood
same we have here. That's what I said. Same to Crete.
Yeah. So basically,
and their mediation is not called kalanthropy as here. It is called sasmos.
Yeah. So you must watch it, Francis. It was a good, very interesting session of the work that he's done there.
I will watch it.
Yeah. So he's actually taken us through the whole process about who these mediators are and how it goes, because this is, I mean, these are blood feuds happening there. People are, I mean, the whole families are connected and involved. So
yeah.
It's
Same here.
Yeah.
And they invested themselves this procedure, this way, and they found alone who is the person that they will be, that he will be fair, neutral, careful, and all these things, all these qualities a mediator has. And they were the people were asking to this person to take this role.
Yeah.
To avoid the bad. That's what they said. To avoid the bad, and they were meaning the murdering.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's
it's very interesting. It's very interesting and very maybe because we have to find the opportunities in things that happen and we can't avoid. Maybe it's a very good opportunity to realize what is the disaster and what is the choice. Because that's it. That's a matter of choice.
Yes. Yes, Francis, any comment on that?
That kind of intervention, I remember coming across it first of all as a documentary coming out of Chicago in the United States, where in particular in the Black communities where there was a lot of killing going on, they call themselves the interveners, and these interveners would go and do their best to stop retaliation after one act of violence. You know, what escalates the whole thing is a retaliation, culture of retaliation. Everybody has a gun, everybody has a knife, or whatever. And I had the opportunity to, in New York City, in New York's Crown Heights, and that's in Brooklyn, New York, with a similar kind of ethnic community. The Mediation Center in Crown Heights was transformed because of this problem into an intervention center, which is called Save Our Streets. And the young men trained to go out and speak to people who had been involved in violence, mainly gun violence, and get them to agree not to pursue it and to find a way to stop the other side from retaliating. Sorry. So that concept has been introduced to those communities, and there are people that know about it in this part of the world, but I don't know that it has been adopted as a serious practice. I guess we feel that it hasn't got there yet. I don't know when we're going to feel and understand that it has got there, but I understand the concept very well of needing to have an intervention, a process of intervention when those things arise. Yeah. So just 1 second, I have to attend to something at the door.
Yeah.
Just,
So Mandy, now you have to maybe, of course, Zakynthos Mediation Circle by itself can take care of it, but for natural disasters, there should be some specific, maybe a structure which is made. Are you speaking? I can see your lips moving, but are you saying something to us? Can't hear you if you're saying something to us.
I was saying that here in Zakynthos, it will be a very great circle because we have all the issues. We have natural disasters. We have vendettas, philanthropies, and
Your signal is a problem, Mandy.
do you hear me?
You got cut off in the middle. Yeah, now I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, I was saying that we don't only have these problems here in Zakynthos. We have something I told you about when I speak about forgiveness. We have the sense of forgiveness in my island, and we realize, and that's something I am trying to connect in my mind, and I'm doing a work on it. Is that people, when the bad things happen, find and have the need of the balance, so good things happen also. And this is the opportunity. Here in Zakynthos, we had vendettas and murders. These vendettas killed the brother of Saint Dionysius, who is the saint of forgiveness. And he went there, he told him, please hide me, help me, they are chasing me. I killed somebody who that he knew it was his brother, and he not only he hidden him, but also he lied to the people that were searching for him. And there is a word here they say that the saint becomes a saint at the moment he does the guilty thing. He lied and he saved the murderer, and that was what made him a saint. And the forgiveness of the murder. I mean, there was all this thing with the murdering, and here in Zakynthos we found philanthropy, such as Crete. We found philanthropy, and we have the sense of forgiveness. These are the opportunities, and these are the choices. Maybe we can't choose what happens, such as the natural disasters. We can't choose, but we have the chance to find an opportunity to do something very good. And that's, I believe, the huge role we have to focus on that, because all the news, all the things that are discussed always talk about scaring and bad things that happen to the world. And people have frozen from all this fear and all this information, bad information. But it would be so nice for people calm and positive. Let's see how things are, and let's see what good can come from that. What is the opportunity in that? That is a mediator's mindset, which it would be great if we could spread it to people for everyday's things, and not only after, to work only after a disaster, because it is very important also to notice that right after the disaster, like that, people cooperate and do with eyes what they have to do, because there is the tiger in the living room and they have all together to save themselves, and they know what to do to save themselves. Then why only then? Why to leave things in this and not to enjoy this beautiful procedure before and without so terrible reasons and terror? That's very beautiful thing we can do, to feel and do. Yes, it's very beautiful. And disasters, it sounds like a bad word. It shouldn't be as a fear. It should be as a present tiger who we have to do what we do to this tiger.
Interesting. Yes. Good
Beautiful
thoughts.
islands. The tigers are very beautiful islands, animals. Very
Yes.
beautiful. Yes. And Barbados and Zakynthos are very beautiful. We have very common kind of
interesting. We
blue.
are both island people here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Island people look at dispute resolution differently, do they? We have to have one session on that.
Yeah. I believe sea is an environment, a natural environment, but is an environment that has interest. What things are growing in this environment around sea? When you are a small place in the sea and the land is away, and you have to be with the people that are around you, and all around there is sea, you can't avoid them. It is not you take the car or change a town, or happens something, everybody is closing into the island and have all together to find the solution. It is something very interesting to discuss islands as an environment. Yes.
So now it is basically, one is the island as part of a country, and one is the country itself, which is an island. Both aspects, the mediation circle.
Very interesting, very beautiful and interesting. I'm sorry, I just arrived somewhere. I had to be here a half hour ago, but it was so interesting and beautiful. All these things, Francis. I couldn't leave. I couldn't close the phone to stop listening to these experiences. Thank you very much for inviting me to your living room, dear Vikram.
Yes, now this is going to be one session, I think, on a regular basis in the living room. People can come in whenever they want. I'll have one day for that only.
Yes,
that's a
living room.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be on a specific topic. It be come in, let's have a conversation. So I think that's going to happen. But
yes.
Good. So anyway, thank you very much, Mandy, for coming in. And
thank you very much too. Have a nice night. Thank you very much. Very nice to meet you, dear Francis. Very connected to Barbados, I feel.
Barbados.
Islands.
Barbados.
How many islands? It's only one island.
Barbados is just one island, but it is part of the Caribbean.
One island.
But it is part of the Caribbean island chain. So I've worked in different islands of the island chain, several islands of the island chain. Yeah.
That's how Greece is. We are like Caribbean. We have many, many islands. They say that we are the Caribbean of the Mediterranean Sea. We have a Caribbean in the Mediterranean.
Yes, yes. I've met other Greek mediators. We always get along well. I don't know why. I always get along well with Greek mediators.
Something about the island part of it.
Something about the island, yeah.
So nice. Okay. Goodbye.
Bye, Mandy. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
But I think that'd be interesting, Francis. This aspect of how islanders see dispute resolution has to be a specific thing. Discussion on that only. Let's get people from islands from various part of the world, and let's see what commonalities come out from there. Really interesting. I don't know whether I told you, there was one, again, that symposium 2 years back, there was someone from Indonesia, and in her session she did speak about this aspect about how people look at disputes and resolution from the fact whether they're living next to the sea or living in the hills. Their whole attitude towards people and everything is very different. So, so things matter. I think make a difference.
How that can happen.
Yeah. So,
How that can-
so Francis, now the next thing is now, of course, like I said, of course, Barbados Mediation Circle, yes, but these other events that are coming up, please have a look at. The best way is to go through to mediatorvikram.com, see the list out
Yeah.
there, and right now Zoom link will remain the same, so you can use the same Zoom link and just come into those sessions. Have you seen the ones that are coming up?
I've seen a couple of them. I've seen a couple of them.
The ones that are coming up, let me just tell you which ones are coming up now. 16th, we have this International Organizational Mediation Circle. Now it's going to look, idea was to just launch circles. That's what it is. This in the living room conversation will also happen. A few of them will happen, but largely the focus will be there. So the family mediation. Medianos is a game which you must come in for this session to understand what this game that Massimiliano has developed. The idea being that let people experience resolution. So it's a game. Through a game, they go. Of course, the game has been set up in a manner which is, of course, a studied manner in the way it should happen, the way they should approach it. But at least for schools and even organizations to just have it, think of it as a team building activity or whatever. So that's what we will go through, and school, college, environmental. I kept these three on the same day. I said global, environmental, climate change, natural disaster should be separated. It should, otherwise sometimes it all comes into one bundle. Let's put them separately. So
I should come back on the 2nd of November. That's
2nd November for sure. For you, sure. Before that also, any day, any of these days, just drop in. So yeah, all thoughts are important. Yeah.
Right.
But now work on the ground has to happen, Francis. That's what the focus is. So for me, I think let's look at these school teachers, school counselors or whatever. Let's get them together. Maybe there must be some way to, there must be some, I don't know, is there a common kind of a group that they have or some way to connect to all of them saying, okay, why don't you come for a meeting on so-and-so day?
Just last night, I went to a talk and there was a counselor there who said that she wanted to speak to me. So maybe that way I can get in touch with school counselors in general.
Let's what we can do is be like a test case. Let's ask this person about what her thoughts are, what that person's thoughts are on this. I think that conversation should just keep happening about how we should go about it, because this is a work in progress. We'll refine it, but once we get the right people whom we are looking at as the people who want to take it to the communities, then we can then target them and maybe do it on a larger scale. So let's get them in whenever you have time. Just fix up a time and let's talk about the vision for the World Mediation Circle and what we're trying to do. Let's see.
Okay.
Perfect. So thank you, Francis. Always a pleasure speaking to you. And
same here.
We'll see you soon whenever, whichever of these events you want to come in, please.
I'll deal with this one to speak at this one. Thank you very much.